All right, welcome to Completely Living. I am Shans, and I'm so thankful that you're here today. Today we're going to be reading through Genesis chapter 1 and doing a Bible study kind of in a very informal, where we're just chatting and doing Bible study together kind of way. And my hope is either I'm going to go through the books of the Bible either randomly in Bible order or chronologically, which means that there'll be some skipping around because the Bible is not in order, like chronologically in order. It would require me to jump from, the middle of Genesis to Job to back to Genesis, just a little bit of jumping around if I want to do it in the best chronological order possible. So we'll see. I haven't quite decided, but I'm going to just start and see what happens. I will be reading from the NLT, the New Living Translation. You can feel free to follow along in any translation that you prefer, but I find that the NLT is very easy to read and very practical to read. You can use whatever version you want. So we're starting in Genesis. The author of this book is Moses. Moses does not show up actually until the Bible until Exodus, which means that he is writing Genesis, or he's thought to be the author of Genesis, and he's writing it from a divinely inspired perspective, meaning that the Holy Spirit gave him the information to write. That's just the thought of authorship for the book of Genesis. So let's start. The heading in my NLT Bible before Genesis chapter 1 says the account of creation. So Genesis chapter 1 verse 1, in the beginning God created the heavens and the earth. Okay, I promise I won't be stopping this often, but I feel like the first couple of verses of Genesis are just jam-packed, and I want to kind of go through them and unpack them a little bit. So the first thing is in the beginning, God. The word for God in the original Hebrew is Elohim, and that is plural. Elohim is kind of, the way somebody explained it to me is that it's similar to the word sheep, where it can be singular or plural, depending on the context of how it's written. So here it's written in the way of, in the beginning, Elohim plural created the heavens and the earth. So that's just something to keep in mind, especially when you're looking for information about where the Trinity comes from, because the Trinity, God, Son, and the Holy Spirit, is not a word that is specifically spelled out in the Bible, but you will see the theme come through in various parts of the Bible. Another thing about verse 1, so it says, in the beginning, time, God created the heavens, space, and the earth, matter. Okay, and that's going to be important. We'll come back to it in just a little bit. Okay, the earth was formless and empty. This is verse 2. Some translations, I know it as the earth was formless and void, but one thing that I find interesting is in the original Hebrew, the word for was, some people say that it would be better translated as became, so the verse would make more sense to say the earth became formless and void, and darkness covered the deep waters. The reason that I bring up that word, became, is because there is a theory. It's known as gap theory. So there's a theory that between Genesis chapter 1 verse 1 and verse 2, there's an undisclosed amount of time that goes between that. And so the idea is that when God first created the heavens and the earth, they weren't just formless and void, because there's parts of the Bible that says that God did not create the heavens and earth in vain. So obviously the deduction from that is that God did not create the heavens and the earth formless and void, but rather that they became that. And the idea is that from Revelation 12, I think it's Revelation 12, it mentions Lucifer getting cast down to earth and taking a third of the stars with him, or a third of the angels with him. So the idea is that the devil and his fallen angels were sent to earth at some point and wreaked havoc all over the earth and made it formless and void, and thus the earth became formless and void. So that's just one theory of, because there's a lot of theories and speculations about, science versus Bible, creation versus evolution. And So there's an idea of gap theory that explains the time differential between, God creating the heavens and the earth, and then there's this undisclosed amount of time where the devil and his demons are wreaking havoc on the earth, and we don't know how long that was, but that gap explains the difference between creation and science. You can take it or leave it, but it's just one theory, and I don't know what the right theory is, so I feel like I'm just going to have to ask God when I get there. Hopefully I get there, right? Okay, so verse 2. The earth was formless and empty, and darkness covered the deep waters, and the Spirit of God was hovering over the surface of the waters. So I love that right there, the Spirit of God. So the Holy Spirit is right there, right at the beginning. Verse 3, then God said, let there be light. So remember earlier I mentioned at the beginning, in the beginning, time, God created the heavens, space, and the earth, matter. And now God said, let there be light. And the reason that I bring that up is because space, matter, and energy are the components that make up an atom. And I just think that that is so beautiful. Not only is Adam, A-D-A-M, the first man, but space, matter, and energy make up an atom, A-T-O-M, which is a basic building block of life. And it's just such a poetic thing that right there in the first 3 verses God gives us. And I just really love and appreciate that. Okay, verse 4. And God saw that the light was good. Then he separated the light from darkness. God called the light day and the darkness night. And evening passed and morning came, marking the first day. All that was the first day. That's a lot. Okay. Then God said, let there be a space between the waters to separate the waters of the heaven from the waters of the earth. And that is what happened. God made this space to separate the waters of the earth from the waters of the heaven. God called the space sky. And evening passed and morning came, marking the second day. Verse 9. Then God said, let the waters beneath the sky flow together into one place so dry ground may appear. And that's what happened. God called the dry ground land and the waters seas. And God saw that it was good. Then God said, let the land sprout with vegetation, every sort of seed-bearing plant and trees that grow seed-bearing fruit. These seeds will then produce the kinds of plants and trees from which they came. And that is what happened. The land produced vegetation, all sorts of seed-bearing plants and trees with seed-bearing fruit. Their seeds produced plants and trees of the same kind, and God saw that it was good. And evening passed and morning came, marking the third day. So something that I find here is, and I find this very interesting, especially when you think about the theories of, so I just mentioned gap theory. That was the third day that God made vegetation. There's this other theory that each day that's mentioned in the Bible is a undisclosed amount of years. So people say, a day could be 1,000 years, or in 1,000 years like a day. I think that might actually be a verse. But there's the theory that each day is actually a undisclosed amount of time that we don't know right now. And I think that is an interesting theory that I kind of think breaks down a little bit as soon as you continue reading, because in verse 14, it says, then God said, let lights appear in the sky to separate the day from the night. Let them be signs to mark the seasons, days, and years. Let these lights in the sky shine down on earth. And that is what happened. God made 2 great lights, the larger one to govern the day, the sun, and the smaller one to govern the night. He also made stars. He also made the stars. That's the end of the verse. So that's the end of verse 16. And what I see there is God created the sun after he created the vegetation, after he made plants. And we all know that plants need the sun to create energy in order to live. So if God created the vegetation first and then the sun second, it kind of makes sense to say that a day has to just be a day. It can't be thousands of years that these plants were just on earth without the sun to create energy, to create their food, photosynthesis. Now, I do understand that on the first day God made light, or God said, let there be light. But I do think it's very clear that that light in verse 3 is not the sun. It's just light. God is light. So the idea that a day is thousands of years kind of breaks down when you think about it from this perspective, because the laws of physics, it just kind of dictates. Is it physics? I don't know. it just kind of dictates that the sun would have to come in close proximity to the vegetation in order for the vegetation to live. So just something to think about. Verse 17, God set these lights in the sky to light the earth, to govern the day and night, and to separate the light from the darkness. And God saw that it was good. And evening passed and morning came, marking the fourth day. Then God said, let the waters swarm with fish and other life. Let the skies be filled with birds of every kind. So God created great sea creatures and every living thing that scurries and swims in the water. Scurries and swarms in the water. And every sort of bird, each producing offspring of the same kind. And God saw that it was good. Then God blessed them, saying, be fruitful and multiply. Let the fish fill the seas. Let the birds multiply on the earth. And evening passed and morning came, marking the fifth day. Verse 24. Then God said, let the earth produce every sort of animal, each producing offspring of the same kind, livestock, small animals that scurry along the ground, and wild animals. And that is what happened. God made all sorts of wild animals, livestock, and small animals, each able to produce offspring of the same kind. And God saw that it was good. Verse 26. Then God said, let us make human beings in our image to be like us. I'm going to pause there in the middle of 26 because right there where it says God said, let us make human beings in our image. I've always been taught that that was referring to the Trinity, that God was saying, let us, being Jesus and the Holy Spirit, like let us do this thing. But I was presented with another theory that I thought was very persuasive, because there's not, I can't think of, and maybe I'll see it as I read through the Bible again, but I don't typically see God just talking to the other beings of the Godhead, like talking to the Holy Spirit or talking to Jesus. I don't really see that in the Bible. The other theory is that God is speaking to the other Elohim, or the other sons of God, or other spiritual beings that he created. And this is something that I feel like a lot of people don't know a lot about or really dwell on, because they understand, people know that there are angels, but I don't think that we really comprehend and really absorb the fact that there are other spiritual beings, and that there were spiritual beings before us. So the idea here is not that God is saying, let us make human beings in our image, like God needed help or anything. God didn't need help. It's more, it was explained to me more of like, if you're in a room full of people and you say, hey, let's order a pizza. And in reality, only one person is going to place the order for the pizza, but you just say, hey, let's order it, and one person does the work. God is sitting in this divine council, and there's other places where the divine council is mentioned. There's Psalms where other Elohim and sons of God are mentioned, other spiritual beings. We know there's cherubim, which is going to come up in Genesis. So there are a lot of other spiritual beings. So the idea is that God is speaking to other spiritual beings and saying, let's do this, but then God is actually doing it just on his own. I don't know which one it is. Is God speaking to the Trinity here, but doesn't really speak to the Trinity anywhere else? Or is God speaking to other spiritual beings? I don't know. I will have to ask him when we get there. Okay, so verse 26. Then God said, let us make human beings in our image to be like us. They will reign over the fish in the sea, the birds in the sky, the livestock, and all the wild animals on the earth, and the small animals that scurry along the ground. So God created human beings in his own image. In the image of God, he created them. Male and female, he created them. Something that I love here, and from verse 26 and 27, is that God said they will reign over the fish in the sea. God created them. They will reign. They will have dominion. There's no difference between the responsibilities or the roles that God originally prescribed for men and women. They were told to reign. It's equality. And I love that, because I think there's a lot of arguments about Christianity or about God or the Bible that says that it's endorsing the patriarchy or exalts men over women and things like that. And I think that if you actually understand it in the context, that that's not the case. And I just love that right here, God is giving men and women equal dominion over the land, which is so important to understand how God views both men and women on earth. Verse 28, then God blessed them, and said, be fruitful and multiply. Fill the earth and govern it. Reign over the fish in the sea, the birds in the sky, and all the animals that scurry along the ground. Then God said, look, I have given you every seed-bearing plant, throughout the earth and all the fruit trees for your food. Interesting. So verse 29, God said, look, I have given you every seed-bearing plant throughout the earth and all the fruit trees for your food. So the original design for human beings was to eat plants and fruit. Hello, vegans. The original design for humans was to eat plants and fruit and things like that. God doesn't prescribe for people to eat meat until later on in Genesis, I believe, maybe even after the flood. So we'll get there at some point, but I just think that that's interesting. And I have given verse 30, and I have given every green plant as food for all the wild animals, the birds in the sky, and the small animals that scurry along the ground, everything that has life. And that is what happened. So the original design for animals were herbivores. So human beings ate plants and fruit, and the animals ate green plants. Animals were herbivores. Interesting. Verse 31. Then God looked over all he had made, and he saw that it was very good. So God changes it up right here. Everything else was good, but after he makes man, it was very good. How beautiful! Just that change in the word is just so lovely. And evening passed and morning came, marking the sixth day. All right, so that's the end of Genesis 1. I really love how there's so much. You can spend a lot more time in Genesis 1 just unpacking everything, every single verse, and getting what you can glean from it and taking out everything. I mean, I think that even though we kind of went through it and we stopped a little bit, there's still so much that you can get from this. One of the notes, I'm going to go back because I do think that this is a good note. One of the notes that I had in here from when God was making vegetation, Genesis chapter 1, verse 9, where he's making vegetation. I wrote down a note because I don't know if it was somebody in a Bible study said this to me or where I got this, but when you remove the tree from the dirt, it dies, right? And when you remove the human from God, it dies. For some reason, I wrote that down right here because it just made so much sense to me. And it'll make even more sense as we continue to delve into Genesis and learn about the fall and the removal of human beings from the covenant with God and the impact that had. But I just really enjoy reading Genesis and just seeing the beauty in the Bible and all of the things that God specifically puts in there for us. So I am going to stop there. We'll stop there with Genesis 1. We'll pick it back up. Like I said, I don't know if I'm going to skip around in the Bible or what we're going to do, but we'll just let the Holy Spirit lead us and see what happens. But if you enjoyed this, please stick around, subscribe to my channel, and I will see you next time.